it's time to get some spuds planted. So I'm going to plant my first and second early potatoes today. And here are the varieties which I've got. I've got a couple of nice varieties here. So I've got some rocket potatoes here. These have been chitting now for the last 6 weeks, and they've got some nice chits on them. They're about 1 inch long now, so they're ready for planting, and this will give us a head start with growth as well, as opposed to just sticking a potato in the ground without chits on them. And we've also got some kestrel second earlies there as well. These have got some nice chits on them. These are a favourite of mine. I love kestrel potatoes. I grow them every single year. They've got lovely purple eyes and they're delicious as well. Really good eating qualities. So yeah, they've got some nice chits on them as well. So we've got rocket first earlies and kestrel second earlies. So I grow my potatoes in these 30-litre buckets. I find this yields the best results as opposed to growing them in the ground because I don't have any problems with pest damage. I have quite a bad problem with wireworm if I grow them in the ground, and slug damage as well. But when I grow them in these 30-litre containers, I end up with potatoes which are much cleaner than growing them in the ground. And yeah, it's a good size for growing potatoes in, really, to be honest. Now, firstly, first and second early potatoes are planted much earlier and take much less time to grow. They can be harvested in as little as 12 weeks, and these are the varieties which are generally used for new potatoes, so they're not really used for storing. They're also better for container gardening because the plants are much smaller and they grow for much less time. They are better suited for people with smaller spaces. If you have a problem with potato blight, then these are the varieties which you may want to consider growing. Because they take much less time to grow, they're probably going to be harvested before the potato blight gets a hold of your potatoes, which is usually around July, August time. But with main crop varieties, on the other hand, these are harvested around late summer, early autumn, so much later than the first and second earlies. Now, I'm only actually using 3 ingredients when I'm planting these potatoes in the containers, and I'm doing it to save money, because if I were to fill these 12 containers, I'm going to need a heck of a lot of compost to top these up. Just did some simple maths, 30 times by 12. That's a lot of bags of compost, and it's not cheap to buy compost, is it? It's very expensive lately. I just can't afford to be filling this up with fresh compost. But thankfully we don't need to do that. There are different things that we can do and we'll end up with the same results. So what I do is I use well-rotted horse manure, I use some used compost from last year's tomatoes and potatoes, and I also use some bloodfish and bone. So what I'm going to do here, I've got some well-rotted horse manure on the bottom third of these containers. I got it last autumn, so it's been sat on the allotment now since last autumn. So it's had a good few months to start rotting down, so it's not fresh. And this is what I do. People have different ways of doing things, but this is the way that I like to do it. So I've got my horse manure there, and I'm just going to sprinkle a little bit of bloodfish and bone over the top there, nothing crazy. And then we're going to get a couple of our early potatoes. I've got kestrel here, and yeah, there are some nice chits on there, if you can see that. Chitting away nicely there. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to stick 2 on the bottom third like that, chits facing up if I can, and then what I'm going to do, I'm going to put my used compost on top there like that. I'm going to remember where I placed the first ones, so I placed them there like that. I'm going to keep in my mind that that's where I placed them. Stick some more compost on. Then I'm going to get a little bit more of this well-rotted horse manure, stick it in there, another layer. A little bit more bloodfish and bone. And then I'm going to go in with another 2 of the potatoes on the alternate side though. The first ones I put at the bottom were here. I'm going to put the next ones here. So I'm actually growing these on 2 separate levels. Now this is the difference between first and second early potatoes, or determinate potatoes, and main crop potatoes. Now first and second early potatoes only grow on a single level. So I'm growing these on 2 separate levels here to make the most use of the space in the container. It's a common misconception and a myth that you need to earth up first and second early potatoes. I've seen a lot of people planting their first and second early potatoes on the bottom third of the container and then putting a bit of compost in, and then continually putting compost in as the plant grows up through the container. Now, it's said that by putting compost in as the plant grows up through the container, the plant would, like a tomato, grow roots or side shoots or stolons, whatever you want to call them. The idea is it will grow those and then produce more potatoes. But first and second early potatoes don't do this. They actually grow on a single level, unlike main crop potatoes. With main crop potatoes, yes, this works because they will produce these side shoots as you keep adding compost. Now, the only benefit this would have if you were to keep earthing up these potatoes is it would exclude the light from touching the potatoes and turning them green. But because we're adding quite a bit of compost on top of here anyway, and I also apply a straw mulch on the top, I don't have an issue with this. So what I like to do, I grow these potatoes on 2 levels, the bottom third and then the top third as well. That way, no space is wasted. So I've got my 2 potatoes on the top there, and I'm just going to put this used compost on top there to finish it off. So I've got more than enough nutrients here. There'll be some nutrients left in the used compost as well, but then I've got the horse manure and I've got the blood fish and bone as well. So I'm going to go and do the rest of these potatoes now. So that's 12 30-litre buckets filled up now with my first and second early potatoes, Rocket and Kestrel. And now I'm sweating. That was a bit of a workout. So what I'm going to do here now, I'm going to mulch the top with this straw which I've got here. And this is going to do 3 things. Firstly, it's going to help with watering. It's going to hold the moisture in these containers because they can dry out very quickly when it gets hot. So a straw mulch on the top is going to make it much easier with watering. Secondly, it's also going to stop the weeds from coming up as well, so I won't have a problem with weeds. And thirdly, it's going to help prevent the sunlight from touching the tubers. If any of the tubers do start growing quite shallow under the surface of the soil, the straw will stop the sunlight from touching the tubers and turning them green. In fact, there's another thing which we'll do, which is really important early in the growing season now. It will help prevent them young shoots from being killed by the frost. Potatoes can grow in quite cool conditions, down to around 7 degrees Celsius, but a light frost is going to kill them off. But if I've got a layer of straw on the top, if a frost is forecast, I can just move a bit of that straw over the young shoots and it will protect them from the frost. So it's actually going to do 4 things, so there's many benefits to using a mulch, and that's why I love to use a mulch, especially when I'm growing in containers like this. So that's all my buckets there, mulched and ready to go. So how much did this actually cost me? How much did it cost me to fill 12 buckets with compost and plant 47 first and second early potatoes? Absolutely nothing. Actually, just a bit of time. Just took me about an hour and a half to do, and that was it. I reused old compost from last year, I used some horse manure, which we could get delivered free on our allotment site. I did use a bit of bloodfish and bone, you know, which might have cost me a couple of quid, but nothing much really. I'd buy a big bucket of it, and you know, I only used a few handfuls really. And that's it. The straw on top, there's a big pile of it on our allotment site, so that didn't cost me anything either. So this, if I'd filled this up with fresh compost, I would have had to use 360 litres of bagged compost to fill these up. That would have been around 7 or 8 compost bags if there were 50-litre bags. So, you know, that could have cost me like 40 to 50 quid at least just to fill these up. So, you know, it doesn't have to cost a bomb to garden. You know, gardening doesn't have to be expensive. There are plenty of things which you can do to make it cheaper. And these potatoes grow just fine. In around 12 weeks time, we'll be harvesting some nice new potatoes. Possibly some even bigger than that actually. The cashews grow quite big. Just goes to show it doesn't have to cost a fortune. And that's what I'm trying to encourage you guys to do. You know, trying to garden on a budget. You don't need to buy loads and loads of compost. And yeah, you can use things that you already have, or things which you can get for free with just a little bit of effort. You could just fill a grow bag or a container with just compost and plant your potatoes in there just fine, and you'll get potatoes that way. But we're just trying to make things more efficient and more cost effective. Let's assume that we get 10 potatoes off each seed potato, which is a fair assumption. I think it's fair to say we could get that. You know, that could be up to 470 potatoes from these 47 tubers. So, you know, for the little effort and the very small cost, you know, it's a good return on investment. Of course, I had to buy the seed potatoes. You know, they were around £5 a bag. But, you know, for the amount of potatoes that I'm potentially going to get, you know, it's well worth doing. So let me know in the comments, how do you grow your potatoes? Everybody has a different way of doing them. But I do hope you found the information in this video useful. If you did, then hit that like button below, because it really helps out a lot. And if you haven't already and you want to see more videos like this in the future, then do hit that subscribe button and press that bell icon as well, and you'll never miss whenever I upload new videos every single week. So that's all for now. Happy gardening and stay safe.